My husband's ex was sitting in my place on the final anniversary gala chart, and his initials were beside the change. I was still his wife. I had spent 3 years building the family program the gala was supposed to celebrate. But on the page in front of me, Celeste Arden was listed beside Julian at the royal table, while my name had been moved to table 12 under community partners. I read the line twice because the first time my mind rejected it. The document was marked Final Revision 7. Under the approval column, next to the change, were the letters J, B, and a timestamp from 6 weeks earlier. Julian had approved it on a Thursday night while we were eating dinner together in our apartment at Belgrave Palace. The protocol coordinator reached for the page. Her name was Nora, and she had worked with me long enough to know that I noticed version numbers. Mrs. Belgrave, that copy wasn't intended for general circulation. I'm not general circulation, I said. I'm the wife whose seat was reassigned. She lowered her voice. The seating plan reflects the family's final ceremonial requirements. The family's requirements. That phrase had been used to explain everything from why my mother could not enter through the main doors to why Julian and I were never photographed holding hands at official events. It was a phrase designed to sound larger than the person being hurt by it. I kept my finger on the approval line. Does Julian know Celeste is sitting beside him? Nora did not answer immediately. She did not need to. Her eyes had already moved to his initials. The gala was supposed to mark our 4th wedding anniversary and the 3rd year of the Belgrave Family Rooms program, which provided private rooms and practical support for parents whose children were receiving long-term hospital care. The palace called it a royal initiative. The families called me when a meal did not arrive, when a sibling needed a school pickup, or when a parent could not face another night under fluorescent hospital lights. Celeste had never attended a family rooms meeting. She had never sat with a mother while a doctor used the phrase, next round of treatment. She had never answered a call at 2 in the morning because a father had no one else who understood the forms. But she had once been engaged to Julian, and she had the kind of family history Helena considered useful. I looked further down the chart. Celeste would enter with Julian. She would sit between him and Queen Helena. She would appear in the official family photograph. My own entrance had been moved to the community delegation after the hospital administrators and before the regional volunteers. Then I found the second change. My welcome remarks were gone. Where is my speech? I asked. Nora folded her hands. Lady Celeste will offer the family welcome. You will still have an important role with the beneficiary families. Backstage, in a private capacity, I took a picture of the page before she could stop me. Not the whole document, just the section with my name, Celeste's name, and Julian's approval. Please don't turn this into something personal, Nora said. I almost laughed. You moved my husband's ex into my chair on our anniversary. It became personal before I entered the room. Julian was in his mother's private library when I found him. Helena sat near the window in a dark green dress, a pearl brooch pinned at her shoulder. There were no cameras, no staff except the private secretary standing near the door, and no reason for either of them to pretend they had not been expecting me. Julian looked at the page on my phone and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mara, I wanted to speak to you after the hospital briefing. 6 weeks after you approved it? Helena did not look up from the red dispatch box on the table beside her. The timing was being managed. My marriage was being managed. The gala is not your marriage, she said. It is a public event involving donors, institutions, and the continuity of this family. Julian stood and came toward me. He had always been good at making a room feel smaller when he wanted a conversation to become private. He reached for my hand, but I kept my phone between us. Celeste's family is bringing back 2 major donors, he said. Mother believes having her at the family table will reassure them. Then seat her at the donor table. It is one evening. It is our anniversary. Helena finally looked at me, which is precisely why your cooperation would carry meaning. Duty speaks before emotion, Mara. That is how families like ours survive. I knew the sentence. Everyone around Helena knew some version of it. Love was private. Duty was public. And whenever the two collided, The person with less power was expected to prove love by disappearing. Does Celeste know she's replacing me? I asked. Julian's silence lasted half a second too long. She knows the proposed arrangement, he said. Proposed? It says final. We can discuss the details. You already discussed them with her. Helena closed the dispatch box. Lady Celeste understands ceremonial life. She will not mistake a seating assignment for an emotional declaration. That's generous, I said, because apparently my husband expects me to mistake an emotional betrayal for a seating assignment. Julian's face tightened. No one is questioning that you're my wife. The official photograph will. Mara, the entrance will. The table will. The welcome speech will. Every person watching will see your former fiancé beside you and your wife entering with the volunteers. Helena's voice stayed calm. The public sees what it is shown. The problem begins when family members insist on explaining what should remain private. That was the moment I understood that they were not asking me to endure embarrassment. They were asking me to help produce it. I told them I needed 3 things before I would return to another gala meeting. My place beside my husband restored, my mother's chapel and dinner invitation protected, and a written correction naming me as the founder and current director of family rooms. Julian stared at me as though I had presented a hostile treaty. You know, titles don't matter to me, he said. Then you should have no trouble putting mine back. Helena rose. She was not tall, but people around her had spent their lives stepping back, and that gave her height she did not physically possess. Your mother is invited because you are a member of this family, she said. Invitations are reviewed when a member chooses not to fulfill her role. There it was. My mother was not family. She was a privilege that could be withdrawn when I disobeyed. Julian asked his mother to give us a moment. Helena walked past me, without another word, the pearl brooch catching the light as she left. When the door closed, Julian exhaled. Why do you always force her to say the worst version out loud? I looked at him. Why do you always blame me for hearing it? He sat on the edge of the desk. I signed the change because the donor situation was unstable. Celeste agreed to help. After the gala, we can take a few days away. We can go somewhere quiet. Your mother can come to the country house for Christmas if that helps. He was offering me a future favor in exchange for present humiliation. He had learned that from Helena, though I doubt he knew it. Restore the seat, I said. I can't do that without making this larger. You made it larger when you approved it. Please don't punish the program because you're angry with me. That worked on me for almost 4 years. Whenever I objected to the family's treatment, Julian reminded me that someone more vulnerable would suffer if I stopped cooperating. A patient family would lose a visit. A volunteer would lose access. A small charity would lose a photograph. The palace kept my conscience on a leash and called it service. It had not begun that way. I met Julian before I understood how carefully his life was arranged at a hospital family center where he had arrived without a camera team and stayed after everyone else left. He spent an hour assembling a child's bookshelf with the instructions upside down. When I laughed, he laughed too. For the first year, I believed the private man was the real one and the public man was a costume he had been forced to wear. He met my mother in her kitchen. He ate the stew she apologized for overcooking and asked for a second bowl. When my father died, Julian sat beside Diane at the funeral and did not move when the palace secretary reminded him twice that his car was waiting. Those memories were not invented. They were the reason I kept interpreting every later compromise as pressure instead of character. Our wedding had been small by Belgrave standards and enormous by mine. Helena allowed Diane to sit in the first row, but would not let her walk with me through the ceremonial entrance because the household briefing called her a private relation without official standing. Julian promised me those distinctions would fade once I was part of the family. 4 years later, my mother still received invitations that could disappear by lunchtime. Family rooms began after I found a father asleep in a hospital stairwell because the only family lounge had closed for cleaning. I brought the idea to Julian, and he helped secure The first, unused rooms. For several months, we worked as partners. He carried furniture, called administrators, and remembered the names of children no one had asked him to remember. Then the palace discovered that the program photographed well. A crestless household logo appeared on the folders. Helena began hosting donor visits. Julian's office took over announcements. My work did not vanish all at once. It was translated into royal language until I sounded like a helpful volunteer inside something the family had created. I accepted that because the rooms stayed open. I accepted it because Julian thanked me in private. I accepted it because I thought marriage meant he and I knew the truth even when the public version was simplified. The seating chart showed me the flaw in that bargain. A truth protected only in private can be erased by anyone who controls the public page. I did not agree to return to rehearsal, but I finished the calls already scheduled for that afternoon. One was with a father named Daniel, whose daughter had been in treatment for 14 months. He was supposed to speak for 3 minutes at the gala about the room his family had used. Halfway through our call, he sounded confused. Mara, who is Lady Celeste. My stomach dropped. Why? The media packet says she's welcoming the family room's families. My wife thought maybe you had changed roles. I opened the press folder. The first page showed Julian and Celeste in an old photograph from a Winter Foundation event, cropped tightly enough to make it look recent. Beneath it, Celeste was described as a longtime friend of the family returning to support its most personal charitable work. My name appeared on page 6 under operational contacts. I had spent 3 years in hospital hallways, church basements, school offices, and cramped kitchens building trust one family at a time. Celeste had spent 6 weeks preparing to stand in the photograph. The palace had decided those things were equal because only one of them looked correct at the main table. I told Daniel not to make any decisions until I clarified the program structure. Then I called Julian. The press packet already calls Celeste the family representative. It's language, Mara. Language is how your family assigns reality. Don't call the families about this. They called me. Then reassure them. Tell me what I'm reassuring them of. He went quiet. That the program is stable, he said at last. Is my role stable? We're reviewing titles after the gala. I ended the call before he could ask me to keep working. The next morning, I drove to my mother's house. Diane lived 20 minutes from the palace in a narrow brick home with a small garden she maintained even in winter. She had bought a new navy dress for the chapel service and kept it hanging in plastic on the pantry door because the upstairs closets were too short. She made tea while I showed her the seating chart. Did Julian approve this? She asked. I nodded. She looked at the photograph for a long time, then set my phone face down. Do you want me not to go? That question hurt more than anything Helena had said. My mother assumed the easiest way to protect me was to remove herself before they could do it. I want you there. I said, I want my husband to act like you're his family. Diane gave me the sad, patient look mothers give adult daughters when they know the truth but refuse to force it on them. Then ask him once. She said, not 10 times. Once. That afternoon, I sent Julian my 3 requests in writing. I did not threaten him. I did not mention leaving. I told him I wanted our marriage to survive the gala, and I needed to know whether he would publicly protect the position he privately claimed I had. He did not answer for 5 hours. When he finally replied, he wrote, I am working on a compromise. Please attend rehearsal tomorrow, and do not involve your mother until we speak. There was no compromise to discuss. Either I was his wife at the family table, or I was not. I skipped rehearsal. At 10 the following morning, Diane called me from outside the private chapel. She was trying to sound calm, but I could hear traffic behind her. The officer says my name isn't on the list. Put him on. The security officer was polite. He said, Mrs. Ellison's access had been suspended pending a household review. When I asked who authorized the change, he referred me to protocol. I drove there so quickly I left my coat unbuttoned. Diane stood near the stone gate, holding the garment bag with her navy dress. Two tourists across the road had begun watching. My mother was not famous, but humiliation does not require an audience that knows your name. I walked her back to my car. "I'm sorry," I said. She touched my cheek. "You didn't do this." But I had kept bringing her to a door controlled by people who believed she could be used against me. Julian met us in the palace courtyard. He had come from rehearsal, still wearing the dark suit chosen for the gala photographs. "Mother didn't intend for this to happen at the gate," he said. "She removed the name." "Where did she intend it to happen?" "Come inside. We can fix it." "Is my mother invited?" "If you return to rehearsal, yes." Diane looked away. I felt something inside me go very still. "You are using her invitation to make me sit beneath your ex. That is not fair." "It is exactly what you just said." He lowered his voice. "There are people watching." "Then choose your words carefully." Julian glanced toward the gate. Even in that moment, he was more frightened of being seen in conflict than of what the conflict meant. I took my mother's arm and left. By 6 that evening, the Royal Communications Office released a short notice. It said I would reduce my public duties temporarily on medical advice and would not attend the anniversary gala. It thanked Celeste for agreeing to support the family during a private period. No one had asked my doctor anything. No one had asked me. Julian appeared at a scheduled hospital reception 20 minutes after the statement went out. A reporter asked if I was all right. He said, "Mara has the full support of the family, and we ask that her privacy be respected." He knew I was sitting in my mother's kitchen watching him. He knew I had not agreed to the statement. He still looked into the camera and allowed a lie to become concern. My phone began filling with messages. Some were kind. Some asked whether the stress of palace life had become too much. 2 volunteers asked if they should now report to Celeste. Daniel wrote, "Are you sick? Should we pull out?" I called Julian as soon as he left the reception. "Take it down. We can't withdraw a health notice without creating more attention." "It isn't a health notice. It's a punishment. It's temporary protection." "From what?" "From a public family dispute. You created the public version before I said a word." He sounded tired. "Mara, come home. We can restore your mother's access tonight. You don't have to attend the gala. Just let this settle. And Celeste keeps my seat. The seating plan is no longer relevant if you're absent." It was the cleanest explanation he had given me. They had not needed my agreement. They had only needed my absence. The next morning, an envelope arrived by Palace Courier. It contained a form transferring my family room's signing authority to the Household Foundation office. A yellow note from Helena's private secretary asked me to complete the remaining family calls before Friday because continuity was essential. They wanted my name removed, my chair occupied, my mother excluded, my health questioned, and my work delivered on schedule. I did not sign the form. I also stopped making calls. At noon, the hospital partnership director, Dr. Naomi Reed, contacted me. Naomi was not a palace employee. She had approved the family rooms agreement because I had promised that no family story would be used without direct consent. I received a request for the gala media releases from a new office. She said, "They told me you had stepped away." I was removed. "The statement says you're unwell." "The statement was drafted without me." Naomi paused. "Do you still authorize the hospital to provide the family materials?" I could not answer immediately. If I withdrew, the gala might lose the stories it was built around. Donors might leave. The program could suffer. That was exactly the choice Helena expected me to face. Not until the families are told the truth about who will use them, I said. Naomi agreed to pause the transfer. 2 hours later, my palace email stopped working. My vehicle pass was deactivated while my car was still parked outside my mother's house. A security message informed me that my access was under review because I no longer held an active household function. I had not resigned. They had declared me absent demanded my authority, and then used my refusal to justify taking it. That evening, I opened the project portal from my personal laptop. I still had read-only access because the hospital agreement required the project founder to retain copies of consent records and revision histories. I was not looking for a secret. I wanted proof of when the health statement had been written. The statement file showed a creation date 8 days before I saw the seating chart. I opened the revision log. The first entry was titled Spousal Position Reassignment. It had been requested by Helena's private secretary 6 weeks earlier. The second was Celeste Arden, family representative. Julian had approved both the same evening. The third entry was a contingency note. If I objected to the seating arrangement, my mother's chapel access would be suspended and my own public absence would be attributed to health concerns. The note used the phrase, reduce emotional escalation. The fourth entry authorized the transfer of family rooms communication to Celeste after the gala. Julian's initials appeared at the bottom of the approval chain. I stared at the screen until the words lost shape. He had not been surprised in the library. He had not been negotiating with his mother. He had agreed to a plan that included my reaction, my mother's humiliation, my public disappearance, and the transfer of the work I had built. The seat was only the first visible part. I downloaded the records I was entitled to retain and sent a copy to Naomi because they affected the consent process. Then I closed the portal. I carried the laptop into the kitchen and showed Diane only the approval chain. I did not want her to read every sentence about herself, but she saw the line marked maternal guest access, contingency, before I could scroll past it. They planned the gate, she said. They planned for the possibility that I would refuse. No, she tapped the date. They planned to use me if you refused. I had been so focused on Julian's signature that I had not allowed myself to name what had been done to her. Diane had never asked for a royal seat, a title, or a photograph. She wanted to attend a chapel service and see her daughter honored for work she had watched me build. Helena had turned that ordinary wish into leverage. I kept thinking if I behaved perfectly, they would stop treating you like an exception. I said, Diane, close the laptop. You were trying to make your marriage work. I kept bringing you back because I'm your mother. And every time, they made you wait at another door. She took my hands. Mara, listen to me. I can survive a locked door. What I don't want is for you to spend another 4 years standing on the other side of it, explaining why they had to close it. That was when I cried. Not loudly, and not for long. I cried because my mother was comforting me after being used as a threat. I cried because Julian had approved the threat and still expected me to worry about his gala. When I stopped, Diane handed me a dish towel because she had never believed in buying tissues for the kitchen. Ask yourself one question, she said. If there were no cameras and no palace, would a good husband do this? I already knew the answer. Julian came to my mother's house before dinner. He arrived without staff, which might have impressed me once. Diane let him in because he was still my husband, but she did not offer him tea. He stood in the small sitting room, surrounded by family photographs that had never needed approval from a communications office. Your access should not have been cut off, he said. I can restore it tonight. I saw the contingency plan. His expression changed. Which plan? The one you approved, my mother's access, the health statement, Celeste taking the project after the gala. He looked toward the kitchen where Diane was giving us privacy. Those documents were scenarios you signed. Mother's office prepares for every possible response. My response was not a weather event, Julian. I am your wife. He sat down, but I remained standing. I thought if we planned for the reaction, we could contain it. He said, You mean contain me? I mean protect the institution from a personal conflict. You keep calling it personal when you want me silent and institutional when you want me obedient. He pressed his palms together. The gala is in 48 hours. If the families pull out now, the program may not recover. Come back. Sit wherever you want. I will make sure your mother is admitted. We can correct the statement after the event. For 1 second, the offer hit the part of me that still wanted to save us. My seat back, my mother through the door, my name restored. All I had to do was return and pretend those things had not been used as weapons. Will Celeste still enter with you? I asked. He hesitated. The donor commitments are already public. Will you say the health statement was false? We can say there was a misunderstanding. Will you say you approve the plan? Mara, don't turn this into a public confession. I nodded slowly. Then you're not offering my place back. You're offering me a better seat inside the same lie. His face hardened. If you walk away now, my family will never trust you again. Your family planned to erase me before I knew there was a test. And what about me? That question might have broken me a week earlier. Now it only made the truth clearer. You approved it, I said. You don't get to stand beside the people who hurt me and ask what happens to you. I told him I would return to the palace the next morning to collect my personal belongings. I would not attend the gala. I would not contact the families on the palace's behalf. And any future communication about my marriage would go through Harrow and Finch until I decided what separation required. Julian looked genuinely shocked. You're leaving over a seating plan? No, I'm leaving because you wrote my punishment before you told me the rule. He left without saying goodbye to my mother. The next morning, Naomi arranged a call with the participating families. I did not show them palace documents. I did not ask them to choose me. I told them that I was no longer directing the gala, that the health statement did not reflect my decision, and that a different representative planned to present their stories. Then I asked each family the same question I had promised to ask from the beginning. Do you still consent? Daniel said no first. His wife followed. By the end of the call, 23 families had paused or withdrawn permission for photographs, quotations, and recorded interviews. The hospital paused its institutional presentation because the person who had collected the consent was no longer involved. The family rooms program still existed. The beds, meal vouchers, school rides, and private rooms did not disappear. Only the gala lost the right to turn those families into a polished story. Without their trust, that distinction mattered to me. I was not punishing sick children to win a fight. I was refusing to let the palace use vulnerable families the same way it had used me. Celeste called me less than an hour later. I almost ignored the number. We had met only a handful of times since my marriage, always in rooms where people watched our faces for evidence of rivalry. She had never been rude to me. She had also never refused an invitation that placed her close to Julian. I was told you requested a private absence, she said. Helena said the medical notice had been approved by your office. I don't have an office anymore. She went quiet. I asked her one question. When did Julian ask you to take the seat? 6 weeks ago, the same date as the approval chain. Celeste explained that Julian had called the arrangement a donor reassurance plan. He told her I would remain the program director and preferred to sit with the participating families. Helena had said I found the royal table restrictive and wanted the freedom to move through the room. It was a clever lie because it borrowed my values. I did prefer sitting with the families. I had said many times that ceremonial dinners made honest conversation difficult. They had turned that preference into consent to erase my marriage. Did you know you were replacing me in the photograph? I asked. I knew I would stand beside Julian. I was told you would be photographed with the hospital group. My welcome speech. They said you asked me to read it because you were stepping back. I closed my eyes. Celeste had accepted an arrangement that should have raised questions, but she had not been shown the version I had been shown. I'm not asking you to defend me, I said, but don't let them tell the public that I chose this. I won't. Will you withdraw? She did not answer immediately. Her family's donors were tied to the event, and walking away would carry its own cost. Send me nothing, she said finally. I don't want documents I shouldn't have. I will ask Julian whether the health notice was authorized. If he lies to me, I'll have my answer. 20 minutes later, Julian texted me. Why did you involve Celeste? I did not respond. I had not needed to persuade her. I had only allowed her to see that the palace had assigned both of us roles and expected neither of us to compare notes. Celeste withdrew from the welcome the following morning. Her statement was brief and private. She told the palace she would not represent a program whose director had not freely transferred authority. She did not accuse anyone publicly, but her refusal removed the excuse that the arrangement was necessary for donors. For the first time, the evidence changed someone inside Helena's chosen circle. That did not repair my marriage. It did prove the conflict was no longer something the palace could dismiss as one emotional wife refusing tradition. Helena requested a private meeting that afternoon. I agreed on one condition. Naomi would attend as the hospital partner. Helena refused. I declined the meeting. An hour later, she called me herself. Her voice was as measured as it had been in the library. You have placed families in an uncomfortable position. They chose whether their stories could be used. You influenced that choice. I gave them information you withheld. The Gala funds the work you claim to care about. The work is continuing. The performance is not. There was a long silence. Your place beside Julian can be restored, she said. Lady Celeste will retain the welcome because donor materials have already been issued. You will thank her publicly for supporting the family during your difficult week. Your mother's access will be reinstated immediately. Even then, Helena believed access to my own family was a gift she could exchange for obedience. No. Consider what you are refusing. I have. That's why I'm refusing it. A title is an obligation. Mara. Then keep the obligation. I was never given the title. Her voice cooled. Julian will not leave the family for you. I looked around my mother's kitchen. Diane was wrapping 2 cups in newspaper because she had insisted I use them in my new place. The sight steadied me. I know, I said. He already chose. I returned to the palace with a solicitor and 2 plain, moving boxes. I did not take jewelry loaned by the household. I did not take ceremonial clothing. I took my books, my grandmother's quilt, personal letters, and the ceramic bowl Diane had made for us during our first year of marriage. Julian stood in the doorway of our apartment. You don't have to do this today, he said. The gala is tomorrow. If I wait, you'll call that cooperation. I told Mother to restore everything after the families withdrew. Does timing make the offer meaningless? It tells me what changed your mind. He watched me put the quilt into a box. Celeste means nothing to me, he said. Then it was easy to put her in my place. This was never about choosing her. I know. It was about choosing them. For the first time, he did not argue. I set my palace keys on the entry table. There were 3, the apartment, the private courtyard, and the side entrance my mother had once been told she could use when the main hall was too busy. Julian stared at them. Are you filing for divorce? I'm filing for separation. I need to live somewhere your mother cannot remove my family from a list. He looked older than he had a week before. I still loved him. That was the hardest part. Leaving would have been easier if the good years had been fake. They were not. He had held my hand through my father's funeral. He had sat on a hospital floor beside Daniel's family. He had once driven through a snowstorm to bring my mother medicine. But love did not erase the approval chain. It made it worse. He knew exactly who he was hurting. I carried the boxes out myself. Leaving the palace did not feel triumphant. My phone still contained photographs of Julian asleep beside me on ordinary Sunday mornings. My winter coat was still hanging next to his because I forgot it in the rush. On the drive to Diane's house, I nearly turned back twice. What stopped me was not anger. It was the memory of his question in the sitting room. And what about me? Even after approving the plan, he believed my first duty was to protect him from the result. If I returned before he understood that Every restored seat would become proof that he could do it again. The social losses arrived quietly. Couples who had eaten at our table stopped answering messages because they did not want to be seen choosing sides. A woman I considered a friend wrote that she loved me but could not risk losing access to palace events. Two foundation trustees sent kind notes and then voted to accept my transfer of authority without asking whether it was voluntary. I learned how many relationships had been rented through Julian's position. The people who remained were less impressive and more useful. Naomi brought groceries. Daniel's wife sent a photograph of their daughter painting in one of the family rooms. Nora, the protocol coordinator, mailed my personal notebook after finding it in a meeting room. She included no message, but she had placed the original seating chart envelope inside it. I kept the envelope, not because I wanted to relive the humiliation, but because it reminded me how small the first visible truth had been. One changed seat, one line on one page, enough to expose an entire family system. The palace postponed the gala at 9 that night. The statement cited a program continuity review and the need to ensure that participating families remained comfortable with public materials. It did not mention my seat. It did not mention Celeste. It did not apologize, but it replaced the health notice, and that mattered. 2 days later, the communications office quietly corrected its website to say I was not on medical leave and had stepped away from royal duties for personal reasons. Celeste withdrew from the family room's role before the end of the week. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had not known about the security plan or the false health statement. I did not contact her. She had accepted my chair and my speech, but she had not written my husband's signature. The donors did not disappear. Naomi helped move the annual appeal to a hospital-led campaign with no royal family table and no beneficiary speeches. The family rooms stayed open. Julian sent 3 letters through the solicitor during the first month. I read the first 2. They were full of the language he had always used when he wanted time to soften accountability. Pressure, context, duty, misunderstanding. The third letter began with, I approve the plan because I believed you would forgive me. That was the first honest sentence he wrote. It was also the reason I did not go back. 2 months after the canceled gala, I began working with an independent hospital family organization. My job was smaller than the one the palace had advertised, but it was mine. We met in a converted community room with bad coffee, folding tables, and no photographers unless a family requested one. Diane moved into the downstairs room of my new house while her kitchen was being repaired. When the repairs were finished, she kept finding reasons to stay another week. I eventually put her name on the lease and gave her a permanent key. Julian and I remained separated. He could contact me through the solicitor, and we had one private conversation about practical matters in a neutral office. Helena had no access to my home, my work, or the families I supported. The palace no longer used my name in family rooms materials. The anniversary gala was never rescheduled in its original form. The following spring, the hospital held a quiet fundraiser of its own. Daniel spoke because he chose to, not because someone placed him between courses on a royal program. At the end of that evening, I helped stack the chairs. There was no head table. We had arranged every seat in a wide circle so parents could see one another without turning their backs. My mother placed my house key beside her teacup. When we got home, the same ordinary brass key she had used all winter. I no longer waited for a palace correction or a family apology. Julian had lost his wife. Helena had lost the person who made her charity feel human, and I had stopped asking either of them to confirm what I already knew. I used to think a seat proved I belonged. Now I know the people who love you never make you audition for one.